Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your favorite sports talk show, as I'm sure you can tell. Things look a little different around here these days. We are actually not over at the bar right now. We are going to have to make a few changes today, so I hope you bear with me. Things aren't going to look as good because I don't have all my lights over from Drew's place. But I'm glad you're here because we got a lot to talk about. Obviously, Drew is not going to join us tonight, but instead, we're going to be joined by Don Johnson, 49ers fan extraordinaire. And man, he has been all over me to get back on the show and talk about his team. I had to wait till I lost at least one. Don, how you doing tonight, man?
You know, I could be better, but it's all good. It's always a pleasure to be on the show. Thanks for having me. Hold on to your Johnson, everyone, because it's about to be a hell of a show.
Oh, I know you were excited last night. I mean, after Russell, we'll talk about him in just a sec, but, great game from the 49ers last night, but we have one we need to talk about beforehand. Jacob, good to see you, man. Steve, good to see you, too. Again, guys, things are going to look a little rough today. You're going to see a little bit of pixelation. I don't have enough light behind me, but hopefully we'll get that fixed going forward. Just a one-time thing, I'm thinking, but we'll see. I don't know. You never know. Good to see you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. Why don't we start, Don, by talking about the Cowboys and the Vikings? Because for the past couple weeks, man, I don't even know how long, it's probably been a month, I have not watched a single good primetime football game. This week we had two of them, back to back. I mean, what was your most impressive takeaway from that Cowboys-Vikings game?
The Vikings seem to be the real deal, and the Cowboys seem to be fool's gold to me. The Cowboys haven't really had a signature win besides that win against the Eagles. They're 1-4 against teams with winning records. That to me is abysmal. Coming from a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, to me, this solidifies the Vikings more than it does the Cowboys. They just cannot seem to win the big games this year.
I agree with you. I think the Vikings, even though they've come up short in some games, like against the Chiefs and Matt Moore, where the defense stepped up to beat them, that's a game the Vikings need to win. So I'm not going to say they always show up in these tough situations or always have something going on against some of the better teams in the NFL. But they showed up against the Cowboys, who, let's face it, were a good team. I got to talk about this, though. Jason Garrett, end of the game, the running plays with Ezekiel Elliott. It seems like every time something goes wrong for the Cowboys, we talk about firing Jason Garrett, right? And then when things go right, we talk about how good the roster is and everything else. Is it unfair to criticize Garrett here? Should more fall on Kellen Moore's shoulders since he's the offensive play caller? Or were you okay with the way they were just kind of handing the ball off to Zeke at the end of the game there?
Look, I have Zeke on my fantasy team, but even I at the end was like, what are you doing? You're passing all over the Vikings on this drive. Why the heck would you run the ball 2 times in a row on second and third and 4-8? To me, it was dumb. I'm just going to say, plain and simple, it was dumb on their part to go away from the passing game. That's ultimately, to me, why they lost the game.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Sean, good to see you, man. And Steve wants to know, when is the jersey winner from our contest from last month going to be announced? Steve, I promise we're going to get to it. I just need to have a little bit of time to sit down with Drew and film it. That's all we're waiting on. Hopefully in the next couple days we'll have it out. But then again, every time I promise something, there's always another delay. We're going to get to it as soon as possible. And when you do, I promise we're going to throw out every notification we can to let you guys know. Damon, glad you're here, man. Hope the green screen holds up. Again, it always looks better when I have more light behind me, but technical issues, hopefully it looks okay today. I'm glad you guys are here with us. Going back to the Jason Garrett thing, Don, I want to talk about this, man. How long are the Cowboys going to be one of these teams that you look at them and they have the defense almost ready to go? They could probably use another couple players in the secondary, but especially in the front seven, they're about ready to go. They have an offensive line that at times is elite and at times doesn't seem to be able to get it all together. They have Zeke Elliott, where at times looks like he's the best running back in football. There's other times where he doesn't look like he's like last night, where he looked more pedestrian. And I don't know if you're going to blame that on Zeke or anything else. How long are the Cowboys going to be this kind of Cinderella team that, they can win a Super Bowl and then they keep letting us down? I don't know. This is, to me, is just another in a long line of failures with the Cowboys. I'm starting to lose hope with this team. I was all excited about them in the offseason. They added Randall Cobb. We've got another year with Amari Cooper and Dak. Michael Gallup looks better. And now we're kind of in the same spot where they're losing games to the Vikings because of 1 or 2 bad decisions. Is this going to continue to be a trend, or can the Cowboys ever pull this out? Or are they going to waste this roster?
Now, listen to me and bear with me, Cowboys fans. as long as Jerry Jones is calling the shots on the team, even though he's basically making it seem like he's not, as long as he's coaching this team, as long as he's the GM of this team is going to go nowhere. The guy thinks he's smarter than he really is. In my opinion, now, he's got deep pockets and he tries to build a team. I give him that. But as long as he's calling the shots behind the scenes, the team isn't going to do anything. Let's just look at the next set of games to round out the season real quick. They go to Detroit, to New England. Okay, they might win against Detroit. I gather loss against New England, that's for sure. Then Buffalo goes to their place. Then they're at Chicago, which is a losable game. The Rams, Philadelphia, and Washington. They might not even go 500.
I know. Isn't it insane? I mean, this is a team we were all kind of picking, them and the Eagles. They're both supposed to be super teams, heavyweight showdown, and they're both still in it. I don't know, man. I, for one, am disappointed. Then again, I'm glad the Vikings bounced back because they should have beaten that Chiefs team. There's, to me, no excuse when you got a running back like Dalvin Cook and you can't go and beat up on a defense that's allowing 150 yards a game. It's a good win by the Vikings. This is one of those games that could have gone either way. I mean, it came basically down to the wire. Both of these teams will be in the playoff race, but I'm not sure either one of them is actually going to be tough enough, like the Seahawks and the 49ers and the Saints. They don't look like a team that can go and beat one of those teams when it comes down to crunch time in the playoffs, especially if their records don't stay up towards the top and they have to go on the road the first week to play one of them. I'm going to go with this. I think at this point they're both kind of fool's gold in my opinion. They're going to make the playoffs or they're going to get very close to it, both Cowboys and Vikings, but I don't think either one of them has what it takes to win a championship.
Yeah, I can't see more than one team from the East making the playoffs, and the Cowboys better hope the Eagles don't start rolling because they're in for another disappointing season if they don't make the playoffs. To me, if they don't make the playoffs this year, there definitely needs to be some changes, and I think Jerry Jones needs to be one of them because
well, you can't change the owner, right?
These owners.
You can never change the owner because they own the team.
No, you can't. But I'm sick and tired of these owners thinking they know more than coaches, players, and thinking they can come in and run the show. And to me, that's what's hurting this Cowboys team. I think Jerry Jones needs to sit back, keep lining his pocket, and let the organization run the team.
I'm with you on that. Let me go to a couple of these comments here. Steve says he blames Jason Garrett, and as long as he says yes, boss, to everything Jerry says, he will not leave. I totally agree with that. I think Jason Garrett is a yes man, and that's why he stuck around this long. Because again, how long had people been calling for Jason Garrett's head? Years and years and years. And then they got good. You know, that quieted down, but we're still talking about firing Jason Garrett. As long as he's telling Jerry Jones exactly what he wants to hear, he's not going anywhere. And neither is Jerry Jones. Like I said, he's the owner. He's going to have whoever he wants coaching this football team. My question is, will that ever be good enough? Because yes, Jerry Jones would buy one if he could. He's already said he'd spend $1 billion if it meant buying a Super Bowl. But he's got a salary cap. He can't do that in football. Sometimes you have to go out of your way and hire a smarter guy than everyone else. You need to land a Kyle Shanahan or a Doug Peterson, one of these coaches that has an interesting game plan that can kind of beat teams. Right now, Jason Garrett hasn't done anything that I look at and I'm like, oh, they can win because they're doing something different.
What about Mike McCarthy? Do you think that'd be a great fit for the team? Because I sure as heck do.
It would be an upgrade. I definitely can't disagree with that. Jordan says, "What's up with Michigan State? What's up with Michigan State football team this year? They're not great. They're very inconsistent. And even though they're a team that has showed up and played tough at times, they have not really put together 4 great quarters of college football this season." I think they're just on to next year. I hate it for you, but I think Michigan State's on to next year, man. They're one of those teams that even though playoff aspirations were pretty much out the window from the get-go this year, it's still pretty disappointing when you talk about what Sparty was when Kirk Cousins was there and how good they were for a time. They're just not that same team. They need to rebuild. A couple more of these. Sean says, what do we think about the New York Yankees free agents for next year? The Yankees need to get back Brett Gardner. I also think they need to add pitching because that's the reason they didn't beat the Astros this year. They didn't have the starting pitching to win, and I think it starts by hiring the Astros' former ace, Garrett Cole. As soon as they bring him in, they got a legitimate number 1 guy. They'll need number 2. That I know they have like Pineda and they've had Masahiro Tanaka, but I would like to see him add 2 guys here, and it doesn't need to be the best in the world. If it's Garrett Cole and another mid-range starter, I think the Yankees will be just fine when you look at how good those bats actually are. couple more. Andrew says it's a waste from the Cowboys, and he says, what's up? Luke says, Cam going to Chicago. We are going to talk about that. He said if there's one place he wants to be traded to, that's where it is. We'll get to that in just a minute. Couple more here. Andrew also says the Eagles are a bigger disappointment even though they'll still win the division than the Cowboys are. And he also said Minnesota's the only NFC team that can win in New Orleans. Whew. Then again, they couldn't beat the Saints, who have been letting everyone run all over them and had a backup quarterback under Matt Moore. Do you think, Don, that the Vikings can go into New Orleans and beat them?
I do. As long and that's going to be a Kirk Cousins game. No doubt about it. After this abysmal showing that the Saints put up against the Falcons, Breeze is going to be on the game. The only way this game is going to end is in a shootout, and Kirk Cousins is going to have to take control, show wise with all that fun.
Yeah. Martavis says he's glad the Falcons got the win this week, but Dan Quinn should have made Jeff Ulbrich as defensive coordinator. I should have named him as defensive coordinator. Again, is it Dan Quinn's fault? Do you look at what he did in Seattle? I don't know. I think it's more personnel than it is necessarily scheme, but I just don't think they have the guys that that are going to be able to do what Dan Quinn wants to do on the defensive side of the ball. And yes, that's partially his fault because he's the guy bringing them in. But again, I just don't think the Falcons have the defensive talent that no matter who is calling the plays, they're going to improve significantly. I know they beat the Saints this week. That was a big win for them. But Martavis, all I can say, man, is it was one good week against a division rival. I would pump the brakes a little bit. Again, good win for him. How much do we build on it? I'm not so sure. A couple more here. Andrew saying he does believe that the Vikings can beat the Saints. Look, I think it'll be a close game, but I don't know that anyone beats the Saints team when they actually get firing. I know this week was kind of a down game for them. They'll be fine as soon as they get on the same page as everybody. Sean wants to know about Syracuse football. He says they need to do better. Look, Syracuse has been the only team that's challenged Clemson the past couple of years in conference, I should say, in college football. It's all in what you expect, man. Not everybody can go to the playoff. Not everyone can be a top 10 team. Syracuse doesn't have the financial backing that a lot of other teams do. So until they get that kind of financial backing that teams like Alabama and Clemson and LSU are getting right now, the odds of them overcoming, you got to hire the right coach. That's what it is. You got to hire a coach that nobody's talking about that can lead an organization to more than what they are. Like, he has to overachieve at that situation, and I don't think Syracuse has that right now. Finally, Jordan says, will the Washington Nationals repeat as World Series champions in 2020? It is very, very difficult to repeat. They were a team that nobody was really picking to go there. The Dodgers are going to be good next year. The Phillies likely to be better again. I don't know. I wouldn't pick them to repeat. If you're asking me, am I taking the Nationals or the field? Go ahead, Don.
The Nationals are going to lose Strasburg. They're probably going to lose Rendon. I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I don't see them. It's so hard to repeat, even in a sport like baseball, when you're talking about it being this long. I just don't think the Nats have the muscle to get back in the NL, which is still a great division in baseball, or a great conference in baseball. We'll move forward. Why don't we talk about your game? I know you've been looking forward to it. Chris says Nats for 2020. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying I didn't pick them to do it this year. So what do I know, right? We'll move on. Michael, I appreciate the compliment, man. Yeah, set up. Again, I know you can't see the green screen, and it's a little pixelated. We'll get some more lights in here and hopefully fix that next time we have to use it. But Don, it's time to talk about your 49ers. I've been talking a lot, man, so I'm going to go to your first impressions. What were your thoughts as a 49ers fan watching them stack up against the now 8-2 Seahawks?
I thought this was probably one of the best games I've seen this year. The 49ers held with them. It was unfortunate to see Emmanuel Sanders go out. Kittle didn't play. Robbie Gould didn't play. We had to rely on the rookie kicker from Illinois, McLaughlin. And to be honest with you, that game could have gone either way, especially after Russell Wilson got picked off in overtime. I thought for sure we were gonna win that one. The one thing I didn't like was how rushed and how uncomfortable Jimmy G was in the pocket in the fourth quarter and in overtime when he realized, like, oh, hey, my two biggest weapons that I would use right now, Kittle and Sanders, are not in the game. He needs to find a better way to come up. I saw a few times where he could have stepped up in the pocket and even possibly ran for a couple of first downs, especially on that last drive. You don't want to. I understand Field goals are a big part of this game, but when you have a rookie kicker, now, granted, he did hit that field goal to send it to overtime, but when you have a rookie kicker in a huge pressure situation to win a game, in my opinion, you can't rely on that. You have to go for the touchdown or at least make it a chip shot because he just absolutely shanked it. I thought one of the defenders got a piece of that ball, but they didn't. He just shanked it. The moment was too big, and that's the only reason we lost this game because if we had Kittle and Sanders and Gold, we would have put this game away.
I'm with you. Again, when we're talking about how close of a game this was, missing Robbie Gould kicking the ball, again, they could have used him in overtime. We're talking about George Kittle not playing and Emmanuel Sanders going out in this game. I think Seattle got a little lucky, especially after the Russell Wilson pick. I mean, when he threw that interception in overtime, I was like, game's over. I mean, they returned it almost all the way to the 50. So I, for one, was a little disappointed the 49ers couldn't pull it out. I understand that they have a rookie undrafted kicker, and the moment was too big for him. But if they can get a little bit healthier, I think the 49ers are still an amazing team that nobody really saw coming. When you take all those first-round picks, eventually good things happen, right? The only thing I'll caution, and I do want you to pump the brakes a little bit, Don, because you've been telling me how good this team is for a while now. The only thing I will caution here is look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had a very similar story where they had a lot of high draft picks, and they put together one great year where they made the AFC Championship, and then things kind of spiraled out of control. Do I think that'll happen in San Francisco? Probably not to the same degree, because I think even still, someone like Jimmy G is obviously better than Blake Bortles. You're not counting on like the miracle year, but it is something that I think they need to protect going forward. They need to continue to keep the kind of hunger that they've had through this first, 10 weeks of football that we've seen.
I think they will. And solely for the fact that the team is still young. If we could add a few free agent pieces in the offseason to kind of complete that defense and maybe give Jimmy G another weapon on offense, that'd probably make it one of the most complete teams in football. But let's not forget the NFC West is on the rise with the Cardinals. The Seahawks are there. The Rams, you don't know what you're going to get, but they can still pull a win off against any of those teams. Certainly one of the more tougher divisions in football. I mean, for me, I think it's safe to say it might be the toughest division in football for the years to come, if not the next year for sure.
Damien says, what's up? And he says, what are the chances of the Chicago Bears getting the wild card? Not great. Again, they're 3-6 now. They're definitely dug themselves a deep hole. But Mitch Trubisky played a little bit better last week against the Lions. And I know everyone's going to say it's the Lions, and they have been one of those teams that, even though they've played tough, have always found a way to lose. They didn't play Matt Stafford. I think it's all about consistency from Mitch Trubisky. If we see a little bit of consistency and he's throwing for 200 yards and not making a lot of mistakes every game, then maybe the defense comes back and says, hey, you know what? We can do this if we play like one of the best in the league.
I'd like to chime in on this.
Go ahead, Don.
So, the next 3 games for the Bears, the Rams, the Giants, and the Lions, very winnable games. If you want to make the playoffs, you have to go into LA, take them out, and take care of business against the Giants, and then again against Detroit. That'll put you at 7-5. 7-5 from 3-5 last week, all right? Then Dallas comes into town. That's another winnable game for Dallas, who isn't as tough as we thought they were. And then they finish out against Green Bay, Kansas City, and Minnesota. If they can be 8-5 when they go up against Green Bay, Kansas City, and Minnesota, and they manage to win at least 2 of those last 3 games, I think they'll make the playoffs, and watch out after that.
I just think it's tough, and I'll say this, Don. Even if they go 8-5 in that stretch, the NFC is just so difficult to get in because you've got teams like the Panthers. You have teams like the Vikings and the Packers that are all going to be competing in the same kind of arena for 2 wild card spots. You look out west, you got Seattle and the 49ers, both of whom are just running away with that division. You got the Rams in the mix there. There are so many teams that are so far ahead of the Bears right now. I don't want to call them dead in the water, Damien, especially if you're a Bears fan, man. I don't want to break your heart, but they have dug such a deep hole for themselves. They need so much to fall their way. It's not just they need to win their games. They need some of their opponents that are running away, like the Panthers and the Vikings and the Rams and the Seahawks, to start losing games. And if that doesn't happen, I don't love the Bears' chances at this point. I'm going to say it's like 5% chance they actually even get back into the race to the point where you can see them compete for it. Because I know the offense, Mitch Trubisky threw 3 touchdowns, and it was like 170 yards against the Lions. The Lions' defense was banged up, too. If Matt Stafford plays that game, he probably beats the Bears, and we're done talking about them as a playoff hopeful, and instead we're talking about where they're going to be drafting and who do they need to bring in to fix this. Again, I'm sorry to play Debbie Downer. I'm just not real high on where the Bears are right now. A couple more of these comments, Don. We'll run through it. Go ahead.
The sad part is that if Trubisky would have thrown 3 touchdowns in their losses, they would have won 3 of those 5 losses, and right now they'd be sitting at they'd be sitting at 7-2 instead of 4-5. That's the sad part.
I agree, but there are a lot of teams out there, my team included, that are saying, like, man, what if we just did this in that game, and what if our record was a little bit better? Football is such a difficult sport because everyone is so close to them that, again, it comes down to a couple plays and a couple games every year. The Bears have dug themselves a hole. The question remains, are they a good enough team to kind of dig their way out of it? Sean says, Jake and Drew, what do we think about Didi Gregorius? And do we think that he will be back with the New York Yankees? I don't. Again, they had their chance. Instead, they've let him walk to free agency. If they were going to sign him, they would have done it already. I don't think that the Yankees are incredibly interested in having Gregorius back as their infielder. I think he's going to move on. I think you're going to see a new interior infielder like Gregorius that he used to play for the Yankees next year in 2020. I don't think he's coming back. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, you already have amazing bats. If they can bring in another high-level shortstop to come in there, the Yankees are a better team for it. Damian says the 49ers could have won that.
Baseball and the way
Go ahead.
They come now, I almost feel like buying championships is kind of out the window, man, because you have teams like the Nationals and the Astros before they got even more better. Being able to bring these guys up from their farm systems and play well, that's the thing you got to start looking for. Buying championships now is a little harder than it used to be.
Yeah, I know. There's like 4 or 5 teams that can spend that kind of money. It's not fair anymore for the Yankees. All right, we'll move on. A couple more of these comments. Damian says the 49ers could have won that game if they had Kittle. Yes, and I'm going to say if Emmanuel Sanders was still out there, or even Robbie Gould. If Robbie Gould's there to kick that last field goal, 49ers win. So I'm with you, Damian. The 49ers, it was theirs to call. Jordan says the 49ers will be Super Bowl champions. Let's pump the brakes on that one because regardless of whether it's the Patriots,
let's go.
regardless of whether it's the Patriots, regardless of whether it's the Ravens or the Chiefs, the AFC starting to shape up towards the top end. We're going to talk about that really quick when we get to these power rankings, but the AFC is not a pushover. I think any one of those teams could beat the 49ers in any given week. A couple more comments, and then I promise we'll move on. Ian says, is this even sports around the bar? I know the look is different, but we're glad you're here with us. I am alone Drew's not with me today. I have Don Johnson on the phone with us. Again, the Bay Area extraordinaire. He had to brag about his team because they've been doing so well, and Drew needed a day off, so sometimes things just work out. A couple more here. Jordan says, when will Tom Brady retire from the NFL? Don, your thoughts?
I'd say if they could get a suitable replacement, I'd say within the next 2 years.
Next 2 years?
That's including this year.
My point is they've already tried that.
Bill
Belichick tried that already. And then Tom Brady said, I'm not so crazy about you having someone like Jimmy G behind me. Why don't you trade him? Because I don't like being threatened. I think it's going to be his job as long as he wants to play. And the question is, how long does the body hold up and how long do they stay competitive? As long as they're doing both of those things, Tom Brady's going to be an NFL quarterback. It's that simple. Nobody's done as good of a job protecting their quarterback, as, in my opinion, over the long term, as the Patriots have done protecting Tom Brady. So as long as they keep that up, he's going to stay in New England. Couple more. Jordan says, will the Phillies win the World Series next year? They will not. Again, they need I think they need better starting pitching if they're going to get it done. I know they brought in some star-studded bats. They brought in Bryce Harper. They brought in the catcher from the Marlins. What's his name? I can't think. What's his name, Don? Remind me here.
Sorry, can you repeat that? It kind of got a little...
What was the catcher that the Phillies brought in this year? I can't think of what his name is. Real Muto. That's what it is. They brought in Real Muto. They brought in brought in Bryce Harper. So they've spent on the bats. Now I think they need to spend on the starting pitching. They still don't have the pitching to get where they need to be. That's why you saw them miss this year, in my opinion. As for starting pitching, Ian says the Mets will win the World Series next year. It's kind of the same way. even if you have the pitching, until you put some of the bats around him, I know they have Pete Alonso, who won NL Rookie of the Year, and he absolutely deserved it. But one guy does not make enough production in baseball. I think they need 3 or 4 more bats in New York for the Mets to get to the World Series. They already have the starting pitching. They've always had the starting pitching. They need 3 to 4 reliable bats before I'm willing to say the Mets are a threat. I think, again, Pete Alonso hits a lot of home runs, but that kind of comes and goes. He can turn into Mark Reynolds and go and hit 220 next year. I think if the Mets are going to be good, they need consistent guys that are going to get on base, have a high on-base percentage, take a lot of walks, and also hit for contact as opposed to just having bombers. And it's worked for the Yankees, but the Yankees also have a lot of other good hitters. It's not just Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. They have a lot of other good hitters. If the Mets are going to make it, they need 3 to 4 guys who are going to get on base consistently. I need like 280 hitters, 290 hitters for the Mets, and I'm going to talk about them being a great team. Until we get that, the Mets, to me, are going to keep being the Mets. Couple more here. Ray says the Steelers' defense held again. It did. Who would have thought the Steelers at this point, Don, would be 5-4?
Yeah, certainly not me, especially when Big Ben went down. This may be another one of those Cam Newton situations where you see if they can make a run for the playoffs or even sneak in by some miracle, I don't see Big Ben. If I were the Steelers, I would get rid of Big Ben.
Ooh, that's a big one and too much to unpack. I would not get rid of him. I think, again, this team would probably be playoff bound if Big Ben Roethlisberger was 100% healthy, even regardless of the offensive struggles. I think he would kind of half that. It wouldn't be his best year ever, but you would see Big Ben maximize the talent they have. And then with the defense playing like this, I think we'd be talking about the Steelers being a legitimate contender. Big Ben's out, though. I think it's time to move on from Mason Rudolph from the standpoint that he's not going to be the guy when he retires. You need to draft another quarterback, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round pick again, take another swing, bring Big Ben back next year, say that 10 times fast, and then try to just develop a guy behind him. I don't think it's time to get rid of him, but I think it's time that you need to be thinking about the future. I think the Steelers, for this year, will they make the playoffs? Probably not, in my opinion. But will they compete? Yes, they will. I think if they go and draft, maybe they steal Jake Fromm at the bottom end of the 1st round and they try to develop him. That's my biggest point. They need to refresh this offense, and they need to find an heir apparent for Big Ben Roethlisberger. A couple more of these comments, and then I promise we'll talk about something else. Ray says the Steelers' defense held again. I just said that one, but I'm saying it again. Michael Smith wants to know, the 49ers, will they win the division? This is all you, Don. Are the 49ers going to be able to hold out, or are the Seahawks going to be too much for them? Or is it the Rams?
I'm going to have to agree there. I think we will win the division. And I think it's going to come down to that second meeting against the Seattle Seahawks and going into Seattle and winning that game.
I totally agree with you. And again, one healthy player, whether it's Kittle, whether it's Emmanuel Sanders for the entire game, whether it's Robbie Gould kicking the field goal at the end, and we're probably talking about a different result, and we'll be saying, hey, 49ers are legit because they just beat the Seahawks. I mean, we all know they're legit. The talk before was they didn't play anybody, kind of like the Patriots did, but then they went and played the Seahawks like it was, to be honest, it looked like a playoff game to me. That kind of atmosphere and the way both of those teams played, it felt like the 49ers were as good as everyone believed that they could be. You watch the Patriots when they went to play the Ravens, they didn't look the same. Not at all. Couple more comments here. Ian says, the Steelers still have a chance to take the North. It's slight, but they definitely could make a wild card. If you look at the record, 5-4 in the AFC is definitely sitting pretty. You can't deny that. Then again, you have a lot of these other.
If they make a playoffs real quick, why would you bring back Ben Roethlisberger?
Because
I would not. It makes zero sense to me to do that.
Well, let me say this, Don.
With age, unfortunately, like Tom Brady does.
Then let me throw you this, Don. You're the Steelers GM right now. You make the playoffs without Ben Roethlisberger. What do you do next season?
Trade him. Bye. I'm bringing in more talent to put around my future quarterback if we make the playoffs.
Okay, but you made the playoffs. You're going to have a pick that's in the 20s, so odds are you're going to miss out on Tua Tagovailoa. You're going to miss out on Joe Burrow. You're probably missing Justin Herbert. Maybe even someone like Jake Fromm goes before that. Let's say you miss in the draft. Who are you signing? Is it Andy Dalton? Is it Cam Newton? Who are you going to bring in that's going to be better than Ben Roethlisberger?
I'm sticking with the future, Mason Rudolph.
Mason Rudolph for next year, I'm sorry. At least in the short term, I got to keep Big Ben around for that. I'm not the way Mason Rudolph has played. He's had like one good game, his first good game, and beyond that, the defense has carried his rear end to the finish line. I cannot tell you, in my humble opinion, that Mason Rudolph is the guy that I would give the reins to for 16 games going into 2020. I just couldn't do it. Not when the defense looks like this. You bring Big Ben back, and I would even get rid of Mason Rudolph and sign another one of these free agent quarterbacks. That's all I can say. I would never go into next season with Mason Rudolph and say, as a GM, this is acceptable. I just couldn't do it. And you might disagree with me, and that's fine, but I couldn't go with Mason Rudolph and say, this has to be our starter for 2020. Not after the way he's played in 2019. Am I wrong, guys? Let me know in the comments, because, again, I want your opinion, too. I think Big Ben has to be the starting quarterback next year. I know you said trade him, but how much do you think you would trade, Don?
If they make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs. Now, that's the only reason I'm saying that I would trade him. If they make the playoffs. Just because of the simple fact, to me, Ben Roethlisberger is starting to become washed up. It doesn't matter what everyone thinks. You can't live in the past anymore. Tom Brady is the only person that you can say can play to an older age and be able to do what he does just because he's been protected. Ben Roethlisberger's had a lot of injuries throughout his career. And this year, to me, is the final straw. I'm sorry. If they make the playoffs, I got to get rid of him, personally.
I just don't think so. And again, it's a team sport. You took away a lot of the offensive power away from him. Big Ben had an elbow injury. Yes, he's taken more hits than Tom Brady. Are you going to get Big Ben playing as your quarterback at 45? No, probably not. But at 37, I still think it's too early to give up on someone like Big Ben. I think you need to look at it from how are we going to improve. Obviously, Mason Rudolph, to me, not the same talent Big Ben is. You have to roll the dice and say maybe we get through another year and we protect him and he stays healthy regardless of all the hits he's taken. You're better off having Roethlisberger than Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback. The other thing you can do, and the only thing I'd accept is like, hey, maybe we bring someone else in free agency. But my question is, who is it? Cam Newton? Cam Newton's been banged up. He's had more injuries, in my opinion, and worse injuries, more game-impacting injuries than Big Ben has through his career. Is it Andy Dalton? Do you sign Andy Dalton and say, hey, we'll take our chances? That, to me, might be the best option, but I'm still going to roll the dice on Big Ben and say, I'm just going to roll with him and hopefully he stays healthy. I would rather see that than sign Andy Dalton and see the team kind of like muddle its way to 8 or 9 wins next season. I don't know, Don. I disagree. I think Big Ben has to be your starter, and you just gamble. Short of you getting one of these first-round quarterbacks in the draft this year, you have to just roll with Big Ben and say, it is what it is. If he gets hurt, hey, we still got a defense that can maybe put up some numbers. Right now, Big Ben's the best chance you have of winning a Super Bowl. That's all there is to it. And why are you playing? You play to win the Super Bowl, right? If you get 20 good games out of Big Ben next year, the Steelers could win with this defense. Does that happen? I'm not so sure. But at least at this point, replacement for me is draft a third-round quarterback, second-round quarterback, and see if you can develop him. And I know they've tried to do that, and it hasn't worked yet. But you just keep trying till it does. That's about all you can do. A couple more comments here. Ian, our resident Steelers fan, says, heck no, Ben has at least 3 more years. Again, I don't know how long of a shelf life I'm putting on Big Ben. I'm thinking about replacing him. But until I find that next guy, he's my starter. Jordan says, who watched the Cubs win their first World Series title in 2016? As a Cubs fan, I did. Don, I'm sure you watched it because you watch baseball too. The Cubs, look, they, to me, have been a bit of a disappointment when you talk about how much talent this team has and how little they've achieved since that World Series. Maybe changing out managers and having Joe Madden move on is the right move, but I'm still not crazy about it. The Cubs were great when they won in 2016, Jordan, but again, how long does it last? You have to find a way to rebuild this team and get back into the fight right now because, again, 3 years from now, the Cubs team might not be where they are right now. We'll keep moving, Don, because I promise we're not going to dwell on this. We were going to talk power rankings, but it's looking like that's not going to happen. Sean says that Philadelphia Phillies have Joe Girardi. He says, Jake, I will like to see Aaron Boone take Joe Girardi next year at Yankee Stadium. It would be interesting. I like Girardi as a manager. Again, I don't think he's the best guy in the world. Anytime you're coaching for any of these major teams in baseball, things are a lot easier than when you're coaching the Athletics that are always on a budget. But Girardi had some success with the Yankees. I don't disagree with that at all, Sean. It'll be interesting to see. Justin says He wasn't out first, but yes, he watched it. It wasn't his first, but yes, he watched it. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Justin, but it is good to see. I'm glad you're in here. Ian says the Steelers in the 6th seed with a great schedule coming up, definitely making it. It's 5 or 6 seed. Again, it'll take Buffalo falling apart. They have an easy schedule. It'll take teams like the Colts and the Titans and the Jaguars all falling apart, and Houston, 3 of the 4. You look at the rest of the AFC, it's still going to be tough because the Chargers could find their way into it. The Raiders could definitely find their way into it. The AFC, even though they're not the best conference in football, they still have teams that are right in the race with the Steelers and also have their starting quarterbacks or have better options at quarterback than the Steelers do. That's why I'm a little bit out on them. All right, chime in whenever you're ready here too, Don, because I've been talking about 40 hours. Jordan says the Lions will make the playoffs, and somebody laughed at that comment. Can the Lions still claw their way back into it? I said the Bears could. Could the Lions do it still?
No, they're done, man. Especially since Stafford's most likely going to be out of the season under the feet. I think, the season comes to an end for the Lions. They have no type of defense. Even if they put the points up on the board, there's no way they're going to be, competing with these other teams. I can't see that happening, man. It was a big loss for Stafford because, even against the Bears, if they had Stafford, they could have won that game. It could have put them closer, but I don't think so, man. That game against the Packers, when they got cheated out of that game, that's when their season went downhill.
I'm with you on that. Thomas says, do we think the Patriots draft a quarterback next year? If I'm Bill Belichick, the answer is emphatically yes. And they tried it with Nate Stidham this year. Or, I'm sorry, Jeffrey Stidham? Jordan Stidham? Jason Stidham? I always forget what his first name is. Last name is Stidham, the Auburn quarterback from last year. They tried it. Hasn't really worked out. He's kind of been replaced. I think when you look at the Patriots, of course you do. You have a 42-year-old quarterback. From my standpoint, if I'm a GM, I'm drafting a guy in the 3rd and 2nd and 4th round every year until I find a guy that I can say, okay, he's my Mason Rudolph, he's my heir apparent, and sometimes those don't work out. Like I said, I don't think Mason Rudolph is going to be a great quarterback in the NFL, and you just keep swinging the bat until you hit the next quarterback. They have the luxury of having a great quarterback, Thomas, so of course you swing the bat until you find your next guy, especially when you already have that solid starter that you know is going to be there week in and week out if you protect him. So yes, Patriots draft a quarterback, and you draft it as early as you can spare the draft pick. It's pure and simple as that. All right, couple more of these comments, and then I promise we'll move on. We'll talk about Kaepernick working out for the teams. Ian says, look at Philadelphia. They didn't trade Wentz when Foles won them a Super Bowl. That will be the Steelers with Big Ben Roethlisberger. Yes, but the difference is Roethlisberger's 37, and Carson Wentz is like 23 or 24 at the time when that happened. Again, I'm with you in that from the point of they didn't do it and the Steelers shouldn't either, but also that's a different scenario. If Mason Rudolph came in and looked great, I would be okay with trading Big Ben. The problem is he's looked bad for all but one of his weeks, in my opinion. And when I say bad, I mean not bad enough that it's not Nathan Peterman going in there, but it's not a great quarterback coming in that you haven't seen the flash. You haven't seen what you want to see out of a guy coming in the game that you can say, next year, if we build some weapons into this offense, he can succeed. A couple more, then we'll talk cap. Okay, I promise. Bees says, because the Chiefs lost to the Titans. Yes, they did. I'm not sure what that comment was for, but I appreciate you making it. Cody says, hey, Jake, not seeing that Titans glow I expected to see from you. You missed our last show, Cody, because, man, was I having a good time. Drew was not. That's all I can say. It's there if you want to rewatch it. Click on our video tab. It's worth the watch. Sean says, Jake, when is the next show of Sports Around the Bar? It is tomorrow, and we're going to be talking college football on that one. All right, Don. Kaepernick working out for the NFL. We'll shift gears here. We'll go into our topics for the day. Only 40 minutes into the show. How do you feel about Kaepernick working out? Is there any hope he gets signed?
Being out for as long as he's been out and thinking he can just come right back in and like he never lost, that's going to be really tough. In my heart of hearts, do I believe that he could make a team? Yes, I think he can. Will he start? I don't know. I can tell you 5 teams off the top of my head that could use a quarterback. Actually, I want to ask you first before I give you my 5. Which 5 teams do you think that could use Colin Kaepernick's services? right now. Say he comes back and he plays like he did when he did for the 49ers. Not Super Bowl 49ers, but, mediocre 49ers.
I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole if I'm a GM from the standpoint of it's going to hurt my ticket sales. And at the end of the day, the NFL's a business. They need to make money. I don't know that I'm going to alienate any part of my fan base because I need to sign a quarterback this year. One of the teams that comes to mind is the Steelers. Like I said, I just complained about Mason Rudolph and the way he's played. If you get, let's say, top-tier Kaepernick and a lot of the kind of controversy goes behind him, I think the Steelers could stand to benefit from having him at quarterback. There are some teams that could stand to improve having him there from a talent standpoint. But at the end of the day, Don, I'm not with a 10-foot pole, and for the simple fact of, like you said, he's been out of the game for a long time. He has a lot of baggage going with him too. It doesn't make sense from what is your ultimate goal? Could he improve a team? There are probably teams that he could prove coming in as a backup or even as a low-tier starter. But what is it going to cost you? Are you willing to alienate 20, 30, 40, 60% of your fans to sign him? I don't think so. I don't think it's a good idea.
That's a pretty good point. I didn't think about it that way. I thought maybe people would have been over this by now. But I'm almost kind of thinking that maybe in their little hush-hush settlement agreement, there was some type of a stipulation where he'd be able to hold a private tryout. I know it sounds bad to say, but I almost feel like that's probably the case here. Like you said, there are teams that can use his services. But, I mean, when you look at it that way, there are just so many people that were affected by this, good and bad. And I just feel like there might be some type of conflict there, bringing them in. But off the top of my head, Jets, Bengals, Dolphins, and Bills, those are all teams that can use a mediocre Colin Kaepernick.
Well, I don't think the Jets are replacing Sam Darnold. He's too young. He still needs the experience, and they're not ready to give up on him because he's had flashes that you look at and you say, Sam Darnold can win me football games if I build the rest of this offense. As for the Bengals, I don't think it benefits them to win football games at this point because even if you bring Kaepernick in, you're still drafting a quarterback. I think that's emphatically what needs to happen. You're going to have pick one or two. It's either Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa for them, or maybe you go wild and say Justin Herbert instead, even though I think Herbert's kind of starting to slip a little bit in people's draft rankings. But I think the Bengals have no reason to bring him in. The Redskins, again, you have Dwayne Haskins. You need to figure out what he is. I don't think taking snaps away from him at this point is the right thing, even though that offense isn't ready to succeed. I forget what the other team you named was, but I'm assuming you're someone at the bottom. Even if was it Dolphins? Is that what you said? I don't know. Is he going to be better than Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's been playing? And does it matter? Again, they're in the situation where Josh Rosen's not the answer. Ryan Fitzpatrick's probably gone at the end of the year, or at the very least not starting for you next year. You need a new quarterback. Let's say Kaepernick comes in and wins them 6 games. It's the dream scenario where he looks amazing. They win 6 of their last 7. Does that help the Dolphins? I think the answer is no. I think, again, the Dolphins are at this point about evaluating talent and deciding what they're going to do next year. So the teams at the bottom are too bad to have him come in. The teams in the middle probably don't want to take the risk of what if he kind of wrecks my locker room or hurts my attendance. And the teams at the top already have guys that are better than him. So I really don't see a landing spot. I think this is kind of a nothing burger where the NFL's like, it's not, we're not discriminating. We're not doing anything else. Look, we'll let you work out and then we'll see if anyone wants to sign you. Maybe he gets a backup contract. Maybe someone says, like the Ravens, that say we can improve from RG3, but if it was going to happen, Don, it would have happened by now. That's all I can say. If it was going to happen, we would have seen a team take the risk before this point. The Seahawks worked him out. The Ravens worked him out. Always something seemed to get in the way of that, so I really don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, if I don't mind chiming in here, I got a little comment from Ian that I'm seeing. How about Dolphins and the Bears? If we could touch on that real quick. So, actually, I think that might be a good fit. At least to bring in some type of competition for Trubisky, maybe light a fire under him a little bit. And let's be honest, he has not had a quarterback to kind of mentor or someone to kind of teach him and different things. Chase Daniels, you're not the type of guy that you want to learn from if you're trying to be a starting quarterback. Yeah, let's take that back.
Right. From that, yeah, that is a good point. I like that point, that if he came in as a mentor to someone like Mitch Trubisky, that could help. I don't think their skill sets are exactly the same, but again, it's going to create a bunch of controversy where the Bears are going to be pressured that if they lose another game or two with Trubisky, to sit their young quarterback that you need to figure out if he's the future or not, right? Especially if Chicago bombs out this year and they get a top 10 pick and they're within striking range of bringing in a new young quarterback. I think you need Trubisky to take these snaps so you know the answer to that, because what happens if you wind up with Kaepernick and you get to pick 12? What do you do? Because everyone that needs a quarterback is going to already be ahead of you and likely will have an easier time trading up. And at that point, you're going to be stuck with Kaepernick going forward. Is he going to be good enough to win a Super Bowl with this team? And I don't know that the answer to that is yes. He's done it with great defenses before, or at least he's come close to doing it with great defenses before, but they've come up short too. Let's not forget that 49ers defense looked like the Bears defense from last year when they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and to back to hit one more of these comments, let's see, we have Damian saying that Kaepernick to the Bears, we will take him. That'd be the last place Kaepernick would go if there was a shot of him making the team. I'm sorry to tell you, but.
And Ian says, how about Dalton to the Bears? See, I see that as incredibly more likely because Matt Nagy wants a guy who's going to be more of a thrower than anything else. He wants to have a guy that he can lean on for 40 or 50 passes a game, because he's already kind of made it clear that he wants to be a high-power, high-flying, explosive offense, even though they don't necessarily have the personnel for that. They've tried that at times this year as well. I think Andy Dalton going to the Chicago in the offseason is more likely if you're ready to just throw Trubisky out. If you're like, he is never going to be the starting quarterback we need him to be, we'll sign Andy Dalton. Maybe our pick's too good to draft somebody. We'll sign Andy Dalton for a year or two, see how that goes, and then we'll move on and bring in another young quarterback if that fails.
Their first-round pick is out the window.
Right.
When they traded for Max, so they don't have a first-round pick this year.
And that is a great point. I didn't think about that. Even with their first-round pick, you're probably going to miss, I think, right? You look at the Bears and the way they've played, they're probably better than 7 or 8 teams in the NFL this year that are more than likely going to need quarterbacks ahead of them. The Bears are in a tough spot now with Trubisky. They need, in my opinion, to play him each and every one of these games. And then if you're going to move on from there, someone like Andy Dalton makes sense. A couple more of these here. Steve says, Cap to Buffalo? Hell no. There's no. Yeah, you don't get rid of Josh Allen. They're 6-3 right now. I know that hasn't been pretty, but they've still won 6 out of their 9 football games they've played. You roll with Josh Allen there. Period, right?
Oh, yeah. You have to. I mean, even though they could possibly bring in Kaepernick to compete next year, no one is going to sign Kaepernick this year. Let's just get that out of the way. If anything, it'll be a contract for next year to at least get invited to training camp or mini camp to see what he can do. And since he's been out for so long, I just do not see. He had a tough time reading defenses just in San Francisco. And I'm not talking about the RPO. The RPO, he did great. But otherwise, there were just a lot of missed throws, a lot of interceptions that he just wasn't seeing and reading the defense correctly. Now, if that's how you were 3 years ago, how are you going to be now that you haven't played at all?
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Ian says he thinks Dalton's best fit would be Tampa Bay. Yes, if they move on from Jameis Winston, you already have Bruce Arians there as head coach. They have great weapons in Godwin and Evans, not to mention tight ends like Brayton, O.J. Howard. If they could build an offensive line, I think Andy Dalton would be very, very successful there. The question is, do you trust the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to build this offensive line? I mean, they've already kind of made some mistakes on it. They paid some guys on there that definitely don't need to be paid. I don't know that Andy Dalton survives well under pressure, and he's going to be under pressure in Tampa Bay, but I still don't hate the fit. I definitely don't. I think there are going to be a lot of teams that don't get their quarterback or are going into the draft that want to pay Andy Dalton to be that bridge quarterback. I think he's going to be the highest guy in demand, even more so than Cam Newton. And let's talk about him next, because we talked about this a little bit before the show, Don. Cam Newton has said that he would accept a trade in the offseason if he goes to Chicago. Do you see that happening?
I know a lot of my friends in Chicago really mind seeing Cam Newton go, but he's got a lingering injury problem. The thing about Cam Newton is, if he was to play in Chicago and he didn't perform, the media would absolutely destroy not just him, but the organization as a whole. Now, would he make the Bears better? Maybe. But that all just depends on the offensive line, which has been the biggest problem this year. Last year, the offensive line was good. Mr. Trubisky did play good. Good enough to make them to the playoffs, and I understand the defense led the league in takeaways. But when you turn those takeaways into points, that's what really matters, and you have to do. So I would, depending on what you would have to give up, I would possibly make that trade. But then again, I don't know if you want that attitude and that distraction on that type of a team.
And like you said, the Bears are without their first-round pick. So how many more picks are you willing to invest in this for a guy that, let's face it, even though he has said that he would accept a trade to the Chicago Bears, if you're the Panthers and you have an escapable contract that you're coming to the end of, if you can't trade him to the Bears, you're just cutting him, right? I think that's what you have to do to save the $18 million that they owe him next season. You have to let Cam Newton go or trade him if he's not going to be your starting quarterback. It's too much to pay a backup. I know Kyle Allen's on a really cheap deal, but think about what the Panthers could do for their roster. They could bring in another major weapon, another major offensive lineman. They could bring in 2 defensive players for $18 million a year. I think that the Panthers are in kind of a certain... They're almost stuck where it's either they're going to trade him to Chicago or they're just going to let him walk for free. And if you're Chicago and I know that, and he already wants to come here, I'm going to wait till they cut him. I'm not going to go give up my assets to bring in Cam Newton when I can go and sign him for the contract that I want to pay him in the offseason. I think if they want Cam Newton, trading for him doesn't make sense. And I know that's the rumor that, he said he'd accept it. It doesn't make sense for the Bears to go out and trade for him at all, in my opinion.
Look, that could also be misconstrued a little bit, too, because the person asking him the question could have only asked him the question about the Bears, and that's what he said. What if they asked him, the same question about the Patriots or the Vikings or, Green Bay? I'm sure he just, at this point, he knows his 10 years over and he'll be willing to go anywhere. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it.
I'm with you, too. I definitely am with you on that one. All right, couple more comments, and then we will go into Thursday Night Football, and we'll talk about that game coming up here. Steve says, Cam in Chicago. How about Cincinnati? Cincinnati is so bad, there's no possible way that they don't draft probably Joe Burrow when they have the first overall pick. Maybe they like Tua Tagovailoa better because he's more of a mobile guy. He's more of an intermediate passer. I don't want to compare him to Dak Prescott because I don't think that's fair to Tua, but he's kind of like a Dak guy that will succeed in the mid-range game and be able to move as well. Cincinnati has to draft a quarterback. When you are this high, it's the most important position on the field, especially if Andy Dalton is gone. I know they're trying Ryan Finley out, but short of him looking like Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, Ryan Finley is not the guy either. When you have pick 1 or 2 and there's 3 great quarterbacks, maybe 4 great quarterbacks in this first round, you have to spend it on there. Am I right there, Don? Are you drafting a quarterback if you're the Bengals?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Cincinnati's dog shit. And I know the feeling because the 49ers were like that for the last 5 years before we got Jimmy G, the last 4 years before we got Jimmy G. And not only do I not see Cam Newton wanting to not go there, whoever they draft, which will be a quarterback for sure, they're not going into a great situation as well. And they're going to know that coming in, and we probably won't be able to see their true potential. And unfortunately, it's going to be one of those situations where a high hopeful quarterback comes in and they bust.
Couple more of these comments. Damian says the Bears can trade Mike Davis and Leno Jr. for Cam Newton. And then he went on to say trade Kyle Long for Cam as well. Again, it comes down to why would I give up my assets to go and get a guy that the Panthers are very likely to cut and not keep that salary on their books?
They cut Mike Davis already. So
even if you had Mike Davis, third-string running backs, and even someone who's had a little bit of success, running backs just don't have a lot of value. In today's NFL, GMs do not respect the position. Even though we like those guys, even though we're like, man, my team's third-string running back has some potential, the GMs always look at it like I can have 13 guys in this year's draft that can do exactly what he does and get paid next to nothing. So they don't like trading for deep round running backs. And again, trading someone like Kyle Long, why would you give Kyle Long up for Cam Newton when you can go bring in Cam Newton for cheaper and for free? So to me, the Bears have no reason to trade for him. Ian says Thursday Night Football summary. Steelers defense, 3 takeaways. Mason's 2 TDs, and the Steelers win 24-13. We'll talk about that in just a second. Jordan also says Brian Lewerke to the Lions in this year's draft. I don't know. Again, if you're the Lions, what position? I don't know if they're keeping Matt Stafford. And that sounds crazy to me, but there have been tons of rumblings coming around that they're ready to move on from Matt Stafford. If that happens, right now they're 3-5-1. You need to be considering drafting a quarterback, whether it's Jake Fromm or Justin Herbert from Oregon. They need to be considering drafting someone if they're that high in the draft and they're ready to move on from Stafford. So again, we will go through all of that, but I need to hear and I need to see some of these guys work out before we're ready to say anyone's going anywhere in the draft. Even though I know you can go out there and find a bunch of mock drafts and everything else, 3 weeks from now, that can all be out the window because he didn't have a good college football playoff or he didn't do well in his bowl game. It's still too early, in my opinion, to talk a ton about where college players are going in the NFL. Or you could have teams win. The Lions could reasonably win 3 more games and not be in striking distance to draft a quarterback like they're talking about doing. Okay, couple more. Mike, good to see you. Also, well, you know what? I think we're ready. Are you ready to talk about Thursday Night Football, Don?
Yeah, let's go. Let's
talk about the Steelers and the Browns game, which, again, when we're looking at it on paper and you look at all the talent that the Browns have, and you look at the Steelers playing with Mason Rudolph for multiple weeks here this season, would you expected the records to look this way?
No. To say the least, no. I think that I would have had the records flip-flop, if anything. If you would ask me at the beginning of the season, I'd have the Browns at 5-4 and the Steelers with a losing record at, 3-6?
3-6 now, yeah, for the Browns.
Yeah, so if you're asking me who I think is going to win this game or if it's going to be a good game, yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. It's another Thursday Night Football game. One team has a playoff spot to play for. The other team has, more potential to play for.
Right.
That's the Browns. But unfortunately, I know everyone's kind of high on the Steelers right now. I'm going to actually go with the Browns in this game, and I think it's going to come down to Baker Mayfield take control and OBJ showing up since he hasn't the last few games.
Well, I think this one's going to get ugly. I think the Steelers' defense has been absolutely fantastic. They're the reason they're sitting at 5-4 right now. I think the Browns will have enough, and Garrett, their defensive end, will make enough of an impact against the Steelers' offensive front that Mason Rudolph is going to have a bad week. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring affair. I think the Browns are going to be kept in check by the Steelers' defense. Their offensive line has not been very good. The Steelers will be kept in line by the Browns' defense, and I think we're talking about a 15-12 or 15-13 kind of game that the Steelers will find a way to drag out a win. I like what their defense has done. I think they win this game, and we can legitimately talk about them being a wild card team at 6-4, but if they lose, that's it for the season. I'm writing both of these teams off. If the Steelers lose here, they drop to 5-5. I just don't see them having the offensive firepower to claw their way back into it. As for the Browns, they're playing spoilers here. This is about building for next year. It's about messing with a division rival. I think they could win this game. Like you said, you're a couple good throws from Baker Mayfield away from it, but I just think the Steelers' defense has played too well at this point. I think they're going to continue that on Thursday on a short week, and the Browns are going to struggle in this one. Drew and I both went Steelers. I think it's going to be incredibly close. I know you said you think that the Browns might win this one a little bit easier than that. I think when you look at it, though, Don, at times I've liked what the Steelers have done. There's been very few times this year that I've looked at the Browns and say, man, that was impressive. I think they're coming up short in this one again, too.
Yeah, well, like you said, the Browns are playing spoilers, and who better to spoil than a division rival? So, yeah, I'm going Browns all the way, and I also think 3 months and have a great defensive tag on the game as well.
Okay, we'll hit a couple comments here. Cody says, crazy thought, but how about Cam to the Rams? The reason I don't like it, Cody, is because it's way too early to give up on Jared Goff. Their offensive line is one of the worst pass-blocking units in football, maybe behind the Titans, maybe behind the Bengals, or maybe ahead of those two teams, but they're bottom 5 in pass blocking. Jared Goff is not a mobile quarterback. You can kind of compare him to Kirk Cousins. Keep him safe in the pocket. Look what he can do. Last year they were great. This year they've been terrible. You can't get rid of Jared Goff just because he's not started real well. Your thoughts, Don?
Rams fans need to stop panicking, okay? You were in the Super Bowl last year. I get it. You got stomped in the Super Bowl, but there's no reason why you need to give up on this team yet, okay? If they can take care of business against the Bears, they're right back in it. You know, they just need to keep finishing the season strong, and more importantly, they're going to have to win their division games coming up because, let's face it, there's going to be a wild card team coming out of that West division.
Absolutely. At least
There
one,
might
maybe
be
two. Go ahead.
Okay?
Go ahead. I said at least one, maybe two, Don. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I said too. I was like, there's one for sure, and there might be two. So I wouldn't write off the Rams just yet, and I wouldn't write off Goff, man. You guys are giving enough way too much hope on Goff. It's okay. You know, it's fine.
Exactly. Young quarterbacks, they're going to have ups and downs. Jared Goff is still a young quarterback, even though he's been paid. And again, he's the kind of guy that must be protected and must have a pocket to thrive in. They haven't given him that this year, and they still have a decent record. I think if the Rams can find a way to rebuild this offensive line going into next year, even if you miss the playoffs, you swing and you miss, it's not time to give up on Jared Goff. Everyone's ready to write him off because he had a bad year with Jeff Fisher, and now he's having another bad year later on in his career. But at the end of the day, he's a pocket passer. They only succeed, unless they're one of the best, they only succeed when you protect them. So the Rams have their work cut out for them. They need to find a way to rebuild this offensive line with limited money/draft picks. That's going to be the biggest question for next year, because the Rams, in my opinion, if their offensive line was playing like they were last year, would be in almost the same spot. Maybe not quite as good, but they would be in almost the same spot as we saw them play last year. A couple more of these comments here. Steve says, so then what? Trade Goff to Denver? I know John Elway would love for that to happen, because then it's not his fault anymore that they can't find a quarterback. Jordan says, will Michigan State win against Michigan this Saturday? My money's not on it, even though it's a rivalry game. I like Michigan to cover here. They've played much better these past few weeks. I think Michigan is going to find a way to get this win, and then we're going to see Jim Harbaugh stick around in Michigan for another year at least. Ian says, the Browns are a paper team. The Steelers are underdogs at home, and the Steelers always win when they're underdogs at home. I agree. I think they're going to come out hungry, and they're going to kind of... Everyone's talked about this Brown team forever. Now that they're down, I think the Steelers are going to look to pile onto that and say, you know, they stopped talking about us. This has been our division for years, and now they were talking about the Browns in the offseason. I don't think players forget that. I really don't. They're going to go into this game, and I think the Steelers are going to have the attitude it takes to beat the Browns. Your thoughts on that one, Don, while I look for the next comment?
I mean, what else can you say, man? Going back to that Jared Goff thing, like I said, I think still overreacting a little bit. If you're really bad at it and you want to play, and if you're a pocket GM here and you get to play GM for the day, I would absolutely wreck the Broncos on a Goff trade. But there's no reason to get rid of Jared Goff, man. There is not at all. He's a good quarterback. Yeah, he's got the weapons on offense. Okay, the offense might not be thriving the way you expect it to, but you were just in the Super Bowl last year, and you played in arguably the toughest division in the NFL. Your defense is trash. You paid. So, look, you have the right pieces at the right spot. Unfortunately, your other pieces on the defense have basically almost no business being in the NFL. That's what happens when you spend all the money on certain places. So I wouldn't write off the Rams. Rams fans, step off the ledge, okay? Your season is not wasted. You still have time to come back, make a run, and make a playoffs. Because you don't know what the Vikings are going to do. You don't know what the Cowboys and the Eagles are going to do. Because obviously those are your only competition for that second wild card spot. So just hang back, relax, let McVay do his job. Stop criticizing the team at every second of the game. This is coming from 49ers guy. You're in our division.
Right.
So let's pump the brakes and let's see how the rest of the season pans out. There's still a lot of games left. Anything can happen. It's the NFL.
Absolutely. Steve says Michigan State over Michigan, and then Harbaugh gets the axe. Even if he loses this one, I'm not sure they give him the axe. Again, I think Michigan's pretty kind of committed that he's coming back at this point. Now that he's got a couple, like they beat Iowa and they were ranked, I don't think he's done a bad enough job. They're going to fire him because there's going to be a lot of coaching turnover here, and who knows, maybe they think they can do better than Harbaugh, but unless they see that, I don't see him moving on. If he does, it was Damien saying, do you think the Bears would sign him as an offensive coordinator? I think he'd get a head coaching job in the NFL. I think someone would be willing to take the chance on bringing him back in after what he did to the 49ers. You got to remember, when he took that job over, they were absolutely bottom of the barrel, and he got them pretty quickly into playoff shape. He did the same thing to Michigan when he got there. There are going to be a lot of teams like the Redskins and maybe even the teams like the Bengals that just hired a head coach last year that are going to say, hey, maybe he turns my franchise around that quick too. I don't think he's going to sign as an offensive coordinator. Would it be the worst thing in the world? No, but I don't think Matt Nagy's also going to want to have that kind of offensive mind in the same offense that he's in. I think Matt Nagy kind of likes being the guy calling the plays in Chicago and running the kind of offense that he wants to run. Jordan also says Raiders
Yeah,
Super
I
Bowl.
think
Go ahead.
Harbaugh. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to read it different. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say Harbaugh, in my opinion, is an NFL coach. He has no business playing or coaching in college. There's a difference between coaching kids and grown men, and I just don't think he has the mentality to coach kids up to get ready for the NFL. I think he's more of a seasoned, mature coach, like for mature people, aka NFL players for
Right.
the most part. I don't think he's a college coach, man. He needs to get back in the NFL or else he's going to be tough.
All right, a couple more and then we'll get out of here, I promise. Ray says, is it too early to say the Clippers are way better than the Lakers? Yes, it's too early to say anything about basketball at all. I mean, they've looked good, though, haven't they? The Clippers are looking, both teams have. The Lakers looked amazing. I think the Clippers have looked very good to this point, too. Am I going to say they're way better than them? No, but they're still my favorite to win it all. I like the Clippers. I like Kawhi. I like the way that defense is going to be playing year in year for probably the entire year. Am I going to say they're way better than the Lakers and the Lakers couldn't win if they played the championship right now? No, I think that would be a very good series. I think both of those teams have a great chance of winning the West, especially with Golden State having fallen absolutely apart. And let's not forget about Denver either. They've been in there. They've been in the mix too. All right, Steve says the Lakers are overrated. I wouldn't say they're overrated. I think both teams are very good. We'll see if the Lakers stay healthy. All right, Don, it's been a great show. Been a great show. I appreciate you sticking it with me. I know we've had some different kind of looks and everything else. Guys, I appreciate you sticking with us to talk sports with us. Before we get out of here, Don, I'm going to give you final thoughts, man. Anything you want. What are your final thoughts for today's show?
The 49ers are going to win this division, and then the 49ers, if they're healthy, are going to make a run at the Super Bowl, and at least in the AFC Championship game. Who will they play? It's either going to be the Packers or the Saints, and I'm going to be taking the Saints. 49ers, Saints, NFC Championship, and I'll be back on the show for that game just to give you a shout and let you know who's going to win it. Because right now, everyone better fear the 49ers, baby. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
All right, guys. Don, we appreciate you sticking with us. Guys, great show. We'll be back tomorrow, 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central. Might look like this, might not. I don't know yet. We'll be back to talk college football and everything else going on in the world of sports. I appreciate you sticking with us. I don't have the names for special thanks, but you're special. You already know who you are. Thank you for talking sports with me. It was a lot of fun. Great questions today. I hope they're great questions tomorrow. So, again, I hope you can join us. And for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jake, your bartender. I know you're tired of hearing me talk. I'm tired of talking myself. I'll see you tomorrow, and I hope to catch you then.